I'm on a plane that's been hijacked. I'm on the plane. I'm calling from the plane. I love them very much, and I'm so sorry, babe. I don't know what to say. There's 3 guys. They've hijacked the plane. I'm trying to be calm. We're turned around, and I've heard that there's planes that's been flown into the World Trade Center. I hope to be able to see your face again, baby. I love you. Bye.
Are they going to be able to get somebody up here?
Well, of course, ma'am. We're coming up for you.
Well, there's no one here yet, and the floor is completely engulfed. We're on the floor, and we can't breathe.
Okay.
And it's very, very, very hot.
Are the lights still on?
The lights are on, but it's very hot.
Ma'am.
Very hot. We're all the way on the other side of Liberty, and it's very, very hot.
Our number 1 is stabbed right now.
Okay.
And our number 5, our first-class passengers, our first-class galley flight attendant and our purser's been stabbed. And we can't get the cockpit. The door won't open.
Jules, this is Ryan. Listen, on an airplane that's been hijacked, and things don't go well, and it's not looking good. I just want you to know I absolutely love you. I want you to do good. So happy to find. Same to my parents and everybody. And I just totally love you, and I'll see you later, sir. Bye, babe.
Okay. Okay, let's see now. Okay. So now you guys should really wrap your minds around that. That's pretty scary, isn't it? Is this the first time you guys have heard this? Oh, some of you, most of you have never heard it. Okay. That really drives it home to you. Did you hear the desperation in their voices? But the thing they wanted to communicate was how much they loved certain people. That really came through a lot. And even though it was 19 years ago, the technology was still there, that we have a lot of their voices and the last pleas that they made. But I want us to try to understand what happened, because that was only one chapter in a longer story. The story didn't just begin with 19 guys deciding they were going to go and run planes into buildings. There's obviously a lot more to that story, and I'm surprised that so many people don't know the whole story, and that's what we're going to talk about. But I want you guys to tell me, why is it that you guys, from your viewpoint, what do you think? Oh, somebody said that was scary. Yeah. What do you think of the reasoning? Evil. They were evil, okay? They were evil, no doubt. But it wasn't irrational, and that may sound strange to you. There actually was a goal they had, a purpose they had. And when you see something so evil that you kill almost 3,000 people, you don't want to admit that there was a certain logic or rationality to it. We just are recoiled and we say, "I was so evil." But I think if we do that, there's a lot that we are missing. And I think that's what I want to talk to you guys about now. And I want you guys to tell me, and you can type it in or you can unmute. What is the reason these people would do something so crazy? Yeah. What's the reason?
I think that they would do it because they're terrorists and they hate America. And
they're terrorists and they hate America. That's true. But that, that really doesn't say why they did it, okay? You obviously can hate someone, but do we ever hate someone so much that we would give our lives out of our hate? That just doesn't make any sense. What other reasons? They obviously hate. I mean, that goes without saying. But did they have a purpose other than just to kill people? Doesn't that make sense? What I'm trying to say is that is really irrational to go and commit suicide. 19 people go out and commit suicide in 4 different planes just out of hate. There must be some purpose they have. And can anybody tell me what that purpose might be? Because they do have a purpose, by the way, and it wasn't an entirely irrational act. Well, it was rational purely evil, but it was rational. And I want you guys to understand what their goal was. And whether they succeeded, we'll talk about that. But they did have a goal, and they had a reason that was probably not a good reason for hating. But I think you guys need to know, nobody gets that. Okay, that's fine. That's good. That's good. Well, let's start with understanding that, okay? I am going to go to PowerPoint here. I'm going to go to PowerPoint as a background. And I'm really pleased. Okay, now, what do you guys see behind me? Somebody tell me, what do you see behind me? Somebody said to take down national monuments, okay. So what do you see behind me? Can somebody tell me? Nolan to everyone, haha, I don't get that, Nolan. The White House office, a picture of people, factory. Okay, this is a picture of Jews before they were executed. This is the Holocaust, okay? Do you see my little head down on the bottom right of your screen? Do you see my head sitting there? Yes or no? Thumbs up if you see my head. Do you see me? You do see my head. Okay, that's cool. This is a picture of the Holocaust. Would it surprise you if I said that the story of 9/11, okay? Now, I really want us to engage in a dialogue about this, and that is my internet connection's unstable, so it just told me. Okay, about 6 million Jews were killed. World War II ended in 1945, and I think it was about 40%, 35% of the Jews, 40% of the Jews in Europe had been exterminated. In places like Poland, it was actually 80% of the Jews in Poland had been executed. So this was a real horrible bloodbath, and the Jews had been persecuted prior to this time for centuries. And in fact, they've been, the culmination of that persecution was really the Holocaust of World War II. There was an expression that grew out of the Holocaust after World War II, and it was never again. And just two words, never again. Yet what they embodied was that never again would the world allow something like the genocide of the Jews to happen. And that's been expanded to include the genocide of any group of people. So you know, how the best way to ensure that the Jews would have a safe haven, a safe place, would be to give them their own country. Because prior to 1948, they'd been scattered all over the world. What country was it that the Jews created with the help of the United States in 1948? What country drew millions of Jews together from around the world in 1948? What country was it? Tell me, type it in, I don't care. It says I'm lagging. Am I not lagging now? I'm not lagging now, am I? So what country was it? Oh, somebody says Germany. At least you're trying to guess. I'm fine now. Okay. The Berlin Wall? No. Does anybody know what country was created in 1948? You guys have a globe there, don't you? You're supposed to have a globe there today. Look around. Is Mrs. Gorley there today? You guys are supposed to have a globe. She was supposed to have gotten a globe. Did you get one? Okay. You don't have a globe. Okay. So can anyone tell me what country was created in 1948? Okay, listen. You guys don't get it. Russia? No. Israel. Israel was created in 1948. Okay? Does that make sense? You all say yes. Okay, now what was the purpose of Israel? To create a safe haven for who? The Jews. Yeah. To create a safe place for the Jews, that they wouldn't have to worry about persecution. They would have their own country. They wouldn't depend on the good graces of people in other countries to treat them decently anymore. They would have their own country. Now, if the Germans engaged in the Holocaust, wouldn't it make sense that they would carve Israel out of Germany? Do you guys agree? Yes. It makes sense. Does it not make sense that they would carve Israel out of Germany? They didn't carve it out of Germany. They carved it out of the Middle East. And I'll be talking about that in a moment. Okay. Now, they carved it out of the Middle East. What countries, and I'm going to go, let me see. I've got a PowerPoint thing and I don't have a map, and I wanted you guys to have a globe, but that's okay. Okay. What countries surround, do you have your book? Does anybody have a book with a map in it? Okay, don't worry about it. What countries surround Israel? This is a picture of Israel. At night, a satellite view. Put your thumbs up if you see that satellite view of Israel. Okay, good, everybody sees it. Now, what can you tell me about the outlying areas? Do you think there's a lot of people that live in the outlying areas? You don't know. Brenna says, I don't know. Actually, there are quite a few people who live in the outlying areas, but Israel has developed it, and you see what happens when the Western values and they create the technology, they implement the technology, and they create a country that's prosperous. And you see that in this picture, okay? Now, let's look at another picture, okay? You see this area here? This is Israel. What area do you think this is right here? Satellite view. What is that? What is this area? Can anyone tell me? Hello, what do you guys say? What is this area?
Afghanistan?
No, Afghanistan is not this developed. This is very developed, isn't it? This is actually Egypt, and this is the Nile River, okay? And this shows how much development there is in the population of the Nile River in Egypt. This is Israel right over here. Do you guys see an arrow? Do you see my mouse moving this? Oh, I can't point up my.
No, we don't see your mouse.
You don't see my mouse. Okay. The lit area on the right of the screen is Israel. Does everybody recognize Israel there? Put your thumbs up if you see Israel.
Yes.
Okay. And then do you see the part? Okay. Do you see the part to the left? That's Egypt near the Mediterranean, and then that's the Nile River, that's the long river of gold, basically, that's there. So do you guys see that? Okay, now, where does this story begin? It really begins with this guy, and his name is George Marshall. If you look at the picture on the left, he was a 5-star general of the Army during World War II. And he was stationed that whole time in Washington, D.C., and he was the right-hand man of Franklin Roosevelt. George C. Marshall was a senior general to both Dwight Eisenhower and Douglas MacArthur, okay? And there were 3 5-star generals in World War II. And those 3 5-star generals were George Marshall, Dwight Eisenhower, and Douglas MacArthur. But this man outranked both MacArthur and Eisenhower. You guys, most of you have never heard of George Marshall, right? But you've heard of Dwight Eisenhower and you've heard of Douglas MacArthur, right? Well, this guy outranked both of them, okay? And he was so well respected in this country, I might add. The picture on the right is when he left the Army and he became the Secretary of State under Harry Truman. Now, this is an important story, and I want you to look at his face and be with him in the sense of remembering his name, George Marshall, Secretary of State. And George Marshall opposed the creation of Israel. Now, he opposed not the creation of Israel so much, but he opposed the United States recognizing Israel. Because in 1948, Harry Truman, who was president, said, we're going to recognize the existence of Israel as a country. And in doing that, he also implied and made it clear that the United States was going to be supportive and do whatever it needed to do to protect Israel from its neighbors. Now, first of all, can you guys appreciate, after the horrible Holocaust, can you appreciate that there are people in this country like Harry Truman who would really want to see the Jews protected? Can you guys appreciate that? Now, can you understand there's going to be reasons that people had to oppose the recognition of Israel? Although, in order for Israel really to get off the ground and be successful as a country, it really needed the United States to recognize it as a country and then offer it protection, to recognize it as a legitimate government, as a legitimate country. Can you guys understand, though, what the reasons might be? And now I'm going to tell you what the reasons were. Because this is the man who became president of Israel. His name is pronounced Chaim Weizmann. George C. Marshall said that if the United States recognizes Israel, 1 billion Arabs will hate us for 1,000 years. Now think about that. George C. Marshall said, and he opposed it with the whole power of the State Department, opposed his president, Harry Truman. He said, if we recognize Israel, 1 billion Arabs will hate us for 1,000 years. Okay, now here's a picture of Harry Truman, who was president. And he was committed to recognizing Israel and helping sustain it as a country. Now, what countries does Israel or surround Israel? Let's go through those. Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan. Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan all surround Israel. What religion are those countries that surround Israel? Oh, very good. Syria, Egypt. Oh, Iraq doesn't border Israel, but those are the countries that border Israel. What religion are these countries in the Middle East that surround Israel? What religion are they? Can you guys break in and tell me? Tell all of us. Come on, you guys. What religion are the nations that surround Israel? And really, that don't surround Israel, like what's that?
Isn't Egypt, they're Jewish?
No, come on, you guys, seriously. Nobody knows, none of you guys know what religion that the people in the Middle East are, with the exception of Israel? Well, let me put it this way. Have you ever heard of Christian missionaries in the Middle East? Have any of you heard of Christian missionaries in the Middle East? Is there any church missionaries that come in and talk at your church? You might have seen missionaries they go to Africa. Missionaries that go to Asia. Do you ever see missionaries from the Middle East? Why not? Come on, you guys, I want to hear some involvement here. Okay, because they're Muslim, they're Islam. Do you know what they do if you're a Muslim in the Muslim countries and you go and you try to convert to Christianity or try to convert to Judaism? A Muslim, do you know
Kill you.
what they do? They kill you, yeah. it's a death penalty offense to try to convert. Now, if a Jew wants to convert a Christian to Judaism, that's okay. If a Christian wants to convert a Jew to Christianity, that's okay. But in those countries, you will be executed if you try to convert Muslims to your faith, okay? So they're not what we would consider real tolerant, okay? So how do you think they feel about having this country that has Jews from all around the world that gathered that are not Muslim? How do you think that makes them feel? You think they're real happy about it?
No, and yes, because that's the
Do you guys
only
see
way
the
they
White House? Do you guys see the White House behind me, by the way? You don't see the White House behind me.
No, because you're sharing your screen with a slideshow.
Oh, that's why. Okay, that's why you don't. Okay. So, okay. Now, do you guys understand that? Understanding that when people have attacked Israel, and I'll show you some more deals. Do these people seem particularly happy right here? This picture. These are Palestinians, and they're revolting, and they're demonstrating and reflecting their unhappiness towards Israel. They're Palestinians, okay? Do these people seem happy? How about these people? Do they seem happy? Okay, they are in the Gaza Strip, which is part of Israel, and it's a place for the Palestinians. And there's a story there I don't have time to go into. But these people are not happy about Israel existing, okay? And they've been unhappy about Israel's existence going on now over 60 years, okay? Yes, almost 70 years, 70, 60, yeah, 70, almost 75 years. These people have had to put up with the existence of Israel for almost 75 years. Now, what is terrorism defined by? Somebody said that 9/11 was a result of terrorists who hated us. But what is terrorism? I've defined it before.
Protest?
Terrorism is what?
Unpeaceful protest, or like against us, or trying to kill us, or basically against our military.
Terrorism is the use of fear or force to achieve a political goal. Let me say that again. I want you guys to grasp that. Terrorism is the use of fear or force to achieve a political goal. Okay? So, we have to ask ourselves, what is it that they're trying to accomplish? Now, when the Jews defend themselves, on their helicopters, there's three words that are very significant. And those three words are made in USA. All of the weapons that the Jews use to defend themselves from the Arabs in the outlying region, and also the Arabs within their borders in the Gaza Strip, these folks here, have made in USA written on them. Okay? The Arabs know that if the United States did not support Israel, that Israel would cease to exist. So when they strike at us, what their goal is, and that's what 9/11 was about, this guy here, when they struck at us on 9/11 and they committed suicide, they were trying to terrorize us and strike fear into our hearts so that we would stop supporting Israel, okay? And they wanted to bring the attention to bear, and I'll look at the bigger historical picture of this. They wanted to bring pressure to bear on the United States to back off Israel. So those words come back to us, uttered in 1948 by George C. Marshall, who said, 1,000 years from now, 1 billion Arabs will hate us if we recognize Israel. It really shows the foresight of George C. Marshall, doesn't it? Now, I want you guys to type in and tell me what percentage of the Earth's population is the United States. Type in based on, don't look it up, just type in real quickly, what percentage of the world population is the United States? 370. No, I want to know what percentage of the world population is the United States. You guys, listen, what percentage? What percentage of the world population? Sarah says 35%. Ryan says 2%. Okay? Somebody else. How come I don't get more answers? I want everybody to type in what percentage without looking it up. There's no wrong answer. 50%, Kyle says. 55, Court says. 23%. Nolan says 40. Okay, that's good. Okay, anybody else? Okay, that's very good. What I want you guys to understand, Keenan says 50. Sid says 40. Very good. You know what I really like about that question is it really shows 20%, Court says. Listen to me. We are only 4 to 5% of the Earth's population. And what's interesting to me is people usually what you guys, the perceptions you guys have, most people have. You reflect my experience, and that is people tend to overestimate the percentage we have. Well, I think that's one of the things that tells us is that we really can't just go ahead and open our borders. If we had 50% of the Earth's population already, we could take down our borders. It wouldn't matter. But we're only 4 to 5% of the Earth's population. So, you know, we just can't, what that also says is we just can't roll over the rest of the world. We need to be sensitive and not try to bully the rest of the world around, because we're only 4 to 5% of the Earth's population, okay? If we were 50% of the Earth's population, it would be easy for us to bully other countries and stuff. So we really want to have a certain degree of buy-in. And so I think the thing is, by the way, everybody knows Osama Bin Laden, right? Everybody's been introduced to him. Put your thumbs up if you know who this guy is who's on there now. He was the mastermind, okay? He was the mastermind of 9/11. What happened to him?
Killed or committed suicide? I don't know.
He was killed by American soldiers, okay? He was killed by American soldiers. And I say that because I was an American soldier, and I'm very proud that the Americans went into Pakistan where he was hiding. And
thank you for serving.
Yes, you're welcome. My privilege. So he was killed by American Delta forces. So yeah, it was just an amazing, courageous thing. And Americans, by the way, we have long memories. There are people like him, and they have to hide in caves because we search them down using our satellites and our intelligence. And bad guys like this will pay the price. They're not going to get out free. And Americans have long memories. And we have soldiers with enormous courage that aren't going to let guys who do this kind of thing live. And he was killed. So this is another great warrior. He's my uncle. His name is Slade Cutter. And this is a book written about him, Slade Cutter, Submarine Warrior. And it's going to be relevant in my the latter part of my discussion with all of you, okay? This is a picture of him. He commanded this submarine in World War II. He sunk. He was simply the finest submarine commander in World War II. And it was the courage of men like him and the men who he commanded that helped bring Japan to its knees in World War II. And we'll talk more about them in a minute, okay? So the purpose of, and let's just stop and then we'll come back to this. The purpose of Osama bin Laden and the purpose of those 19 men who committed suicide and killed almost 3,000 people in planes and on the ground, who hit the Pentagon, who went down in a field outside of Pennsylvania. The enormous courage was shown that day by Americans who fought back. What event in America's past mostly paralleled that day? What day in America's past would that parallel? I want you guys to say, by the way, that was my uncle who commanded the submarine, Slade Cutter. The book was written, several books have been written about him. What event in American history was closest to 9/11 than any other event? Can anyone tell me? Yes, I knew him. Yes, that's how I got into history. He used to tell us stories when I was a kid. He used to tell us stories of the submarine. Pearl Harbor. Benjamin is absolutely right. It was Pearl Harbor that is the event most like 9/11 because technology allowed us to know we were under attack. All of Americans were immediately united. And I think there's some lessons that we take from that. The first is Americans may fight like cats and dogs politically. We have a very polarized environment now politically. And we've had that before, by the way. It's not uniquely polarized. You know what? Let me turn off my top light. Isn't the lighting better this way? Okay, so we're not uniquely polarized. We've been that way. And we were kind of polarized before World War II. But once something like the Japanese attacking Pearl Harbor happens, or 9/11, Americans who are very polarized and fighting like cats and dogs, like we are today, we stand shoulder to shoulder. And so even though democracy sometimes is not a beautiful thing, it's kind of ugly sometimes, like a sausage being made, I guess. People have made analogies between making sausages and democracy. It's kind of ugly to look at. But at the end of the day, if anyone tries to impose themselves on us, we put aside all of our political differences and we stand shoulder to shoulder. And men like my uncle, who is a Republican, fight with great courage and bravery under a Democrat president. That sort of stuff goes by the wayside, because if anybody tries to push us around, tries to push Americans around, we don't allow that. And we group together. And then after we deal with the external threat, then we go back to fighting like cats and dogs, which is the way we often do, and you're experiencing that today. But I want you guys to do you guys have any questions right now before I wind this up? Do you guys have questions about for me now about this 9/11? Do you see? Okay, so the goal of the terrorists was to get us to back off our support for Israel, and that's what it was all about. Okay, now. Does terrorism really work? Does America give in to terrorism?
No.
Okay, but you know what? I got to tell you that it's true that we don't give in to terrorism. You'll notice the flag of this country doesn't have yellow in it. It's red, white, and blue, okay? But I want to go and I want to look at some of these, and I want to get back to the I want to really cover it and go back and get the whole picture, okay? One quality that Americans experience, one common theme that runs throughout American history, are you guys with me on this? I want you to get this. We are constantly underrated. Side by side with the British in the French and Indian War, which ended in 1763. And 13 years later, in 1776, well, the British weren't that impressed with us, by the way, in 1763. And 13 years later, when we declared independence, the British thought we'd be pushovers. They underestimated us. They could not have imagined that 7 years later they'd be throwing in the towel and pulling out, because they were the most powerful military force in history, and yet they gave up. We beat them, and they underestimated us. Now, that was going to be a theme throughout American history, that our enemies underestimate us. Let's look at the next picture, okay? In the American Civil War, the Confederacy thought they could declare secession, and they had no idea how committed the North would be to maintaining this union, to really maintaining self-government, as Abraham Lincoln said, that we weren't going to allow our fellow Americans in this experiment in democracy, this experiment in self-government. We were not going to allow them to throw their toys down in a sandbox and walk out of this experiment in self-government like children. We were going to stick it out. And so the sacrifice made by that generation was unbelievable. And yet they made that. And the South didn't believe the North would be willing to do that. In 1941, and there are other examples, and I'm just giving you the biggest. The Japanese looked at my parents' generation and saw them doing the boogie woogie, saw them the way they were living their lives, committed to consumerism, and they were just working their way out of the Depression, but they were just leading what the Japanese considered to be pretty undisciplined and, let's say, self-absorbed lives. And so they hit Pearl Harbor, and the Japanese thought that the response would be that America would just let the Japanese go wherever they wanted in the Pacific. The Japanese could have their way through Asia, that they could conquer through China, through Vietnam, through Korea. And the Japanese could just march their armies anywhere and their navy anywhere. And so they hit Pearl Harbor thinking we would shrink. But Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the rest of the American people rose up and realized once again, we had been underestimated, okay? And then 9/11. I mean, these people looked at the stuff we were doing online, how we were starting to just really be consumed with our computers, and they looked at the music we were listening to, and they looked at our self-absorption with television and movies, and they looked at our culture, and they said, these people are going to be pushovers. If we take a couple thousand of them out, they will shrink, they will pull back, they'll throw in the towel. And they underestimated us. And, you know, an example of some of the courageous people is a friend of mine, Mike Martinez. I served with Mike in Colorado Springs, Colorado. He was a JAG officer. In 2000 crash with 12 other soldiers over Baghdad. Abraham Lincoln would say he gave the last full measure of devotion. And it's courageous people like him. It's people like him who stepped up to the plate and were willing to give their lives, showing once again after 9/11 that we were underestimated. And I'm going to just say this when we're going to close and take a break now and get back together again, and that's this. I don't think your generation is going to have an easy path. I think the courage and the sacrifice demanded by other generations will be demanded from you. I'm sorry to say that. I just think that's the case. And right now as we speak, there are people in the world who are being told that you are pushovers, that you aren't going to step up to the plate. You're not going to do what it takes. You don't have what it takes to face the challenges that they're going to place before you. People say to me, you teach. These kids today, they're not going to make it. They're not going to preserve our freedoms. And I say to those people, don't worry. we are in good hands. The next generation, like previous American generations, will do what it takes to preserve our freedom. And I just want you guys to know that I stand up for you, because some people don't. And I always stand up, and I'm confident that your generation will take and create an even better world than the one you've been given. And you're going to find that your generation has the Mike Martinez's, and your generation has the Slade Cutters, and your generation has others who are going to do whatever it takes. So anyway, before we go, we're going to wrap it up, and then I guess we're going to meet for another class that's going to be law. Do you guys have any questions on what I've covered today? Do you understand 9/11 now? Kyle, go ahead. What's your question? Kyle, are you going to, yeah, what? Kyle, you have a question? Okay, nobody has any questions. I guess we're going to start the next class at 10 o'clock. Is that a good thing to do? Is that a good time? Take a 9-minute break, and we'll start at 10. Give me thumbs up if everybody agrees. We'll start at 10 o'clock.
Kyle has a question.
What's Kyle's question? Kyle can tell somebody else, and they can tell me.
I put it in the chat. Or why did they attack the Twin Towers?
Okay, because they wanted to have America back off in its support of Israel. And America supported Israel because of the Holocaust. Is that obvious? I thought that I communicated that, so I'm glad you asked that question. They wanted America to cease supporting Israel, which means that we are involved in the Middle East. We have our fingerprints. We are involved in the Middle East because of our support for Israel. And they wanted us to cower and withdraw. Does that make sense? Does everybody get that? Give me thumbs up if you all get that. Okay, I'll see you guys. We'll start at 10 o'clock.